Good afternoon or good evening, and welcome back to the 706 podcast, the podcast where we, the four movie fiends, take a look at a film and decide whether it's one of the 706 greatest movies of all time. My name is Connor. I'm coming to you now with a very special new segment of the 706. This time, we're going to be taking a look at a book. Yes, books, the movies of the mind, the original medium of fictional storytelling, which is still going strong after all these years and still unsurpassed, except maybe by video games, of course. A while back, Tony had the idea of reading the Michael Crichton novel Sphere alongside the Dustin Hoffman starring film adaptation, which we had selected for the podcast. And during that episode, he shared his findings, comparing and contrasting the two works and giving us, I think, an insight into the artistic choices made by the filmmakers. So I thought, wouldn't it be great if we revisited some of the literary antecedents of some of our favorite movies from the show, seeing as films are so often based on books. I'm thinking Thomas Berger's Little Big Man, Jeffrey Eugenides' Virgin Suicides, or even Philip K. Dick's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? That's the basis of Blade Runner. So following Tony's lead, I've taken the initiative of reading one of these books and offering a sort of report on it, making note of its merits and shortcomings as compared to the film, and perhaps allowing us a little peek at the cutting room floor to see what didn't make it into the movie. And then at the end, we'll make a judgment call as to whether, this old chestnut, the book is better than the movie, and if it belongs in our personal literary canon alongside the 706 greatest movies of all time. I think I'm going to call this the 7 or 6 book report since, come on, nobody has time to read anymore. Now, because we often record our episodes quite late in the night, and because Kirk always seems to have something better to do, I found it not so feasible to do this segment right after our recent episodes as a bonus bit. So I'm taking the liberty of actually recording this segment by myself on my phone. I'm not sure whether we'll tack this on to the end of our next ep, or, maybe it would be better if we just made like a bonus episode out of it. So I'm on my own now, but thankfully, due to the magic of audio editing, Tony can actually insert the thoughts and reactions of my co-hosts in post, and I'll just leave him some empty air for him to do that. So without further ado then, let me introduce my colleagues in this endeavor, my book bros, my literary lads. How about Tony first? Thank you, Tony. Editor and behind-the-scenes master. And now wise, learned Anthony. Thank you, Anthony. And next, the heartthrob, Kirk. Thanks, Kirk. And last but not least, friend of the show and returning guest, Jimmy Stewart. Let him know you're here, Jim. Jimmy Stewart, everybody. Now, gentlemen, quickly, since this is a book segment, would you all please share with me your all-time favorite books? This will give us a sense of our respective tastes and predilections. Now, how about Kirk first? Thanks, Kirk. Now, Anthony, I know, how can you choose? But if I forced you? Sure. Okay, I might have guessed something like that. Now, Jimmy? Naturally. Good choice, Jimmy. And Tony? Interesting. Oh, mine? Well, that would probably have to be Notes from Underground by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I know, not exactly the most timely pick, but I'm not one for, chasing popular opinion. Okay, thanks so much, guys. This has been an introduction to the 7 or 6 book report with me, Connor. Now, let's get right into the discussion of our book for today. Connor here again with the 7 or 6 book report. Our subject for today is the 2012 novel Battleship by Peter David, based on the screenplay by Eric Hober and John Hober, a Del Rey mass market original paperback published by Ballantine Books. This, as it says on the cover, is the official novel of the blockbuster film Battleship from the same year, directed by Peter Berg and starring Taylor Kitsch, Brooklyn Decker, Rihanna, and in smaller roles, up-and-comers Tom Hardy and Jesse Plemons. Now, you guys will remember that we covered Battleship, the movie, in episode 21 of the 706, which we recorded in the fall of 2016. That's easy to recall because it was immediately after the election of Donald J. Trump. Pretty crazy time, wasn't it, Kirk? You agree? Yes. One creepy fact. We're farther away now from the time when we recorded that episode than we were when we recorded it from the release of the movie. Now, again, notice that this, unlike many of the books we'll cover in this segment, is a book based on a movie, or at least the screenplay of a movie, rather than the other way around. So it should provide an interesting example of how literature and film differ and the advantages and disadvantages of each. I should add a book based on a movie based on a board game. So there's extra layers, to think about here. A little bit of a refresher on the movie. Battleship was this would-be blockbuster action film made by Hasbro in the wake of the success of the Transformers franchise. In terms of plot, it has pretty little to do with the game of Battleship, which obviously is pretty light on story. The best way I can describe it is it's like the alien invasion movie Independence Day, but instead of Independence Day and, 4th of July, it's Pearl Harbor. Our setting is Hawaii, and our central characters are Alex Hopper, aka Hopper, played by Taylor Kitsch, and his brother Stone, played by Alexander Skarsgård, who for some reason does not get to be called just Hopper. Now, Hopper, who is the younger brother, starts out as a kind of a dirtbag loser who lives on his brother's couch, but then he falls in love with Brooklyn Decker, and to impress her, he tries to shape up. He becomes a lieutenant in the U.S. Navy, and later on, we find him and Stone participating in these naval exercises with other countries called the Rim Pack. Now, this is his big chance to show Brooklyn and her admirable dad, played by a more drunken than usual Liam Neeson, that he's good enough to marry her. But then, boom, a mysterious spacecraft, having followed the signal of the SETI alien contact program, crashes into the Earth, taking out all of Hong Kong and also interrupting the Rim Pack war games. Hopper is sent to investigate this mysterious craft, but then it turns out it's actually an alien attack. So how they try to differentiate themselves from other alien invasion movies is that it's all about naval combat with destroyers and boats and cannons, and in a memorable sequence, an old World War II museum ship that's pressed into service. The aliens put up a force field that boxes in Oahu and the surrounding ocean and cuts off to telecommunications, so they're forced to fight it out in the high seas in this classic naval warfare style. Naturally, at the end, they win, and the aliens are destroyed before they can call for reinforcements. And of course, along the way, Hopper learns the true meaning of duty to one's country, leadership, chivalry, being a man, and all that sort of thing. That's the plot of the movie, which the book follows almost exactly. I recommended the movie for a little bit of trolling, but also because I thought it was an example of a good propaganda film. There's a kind of conservative America fuck yeah vibe to this movie, and it inculcates this message of personal responsibility, embrace of hierarchy and tradition, that kind of thing. I thought the whole naval combat theme was really cool. The visuals were interesting, and even if some of the humor was cringy and dated, that we would get a kick out of it nevertheless. And I guess we were pretty amused, but sadly, my co-host unanimously voted that it should not be inducted into the 706 greatest movies of all time, and I have to say that having watched it with a more critical eye, I really did see the flaws, the cheapness, the rushness, the soullessness of the whole project with a lot more clarity. There are problems with the editing, the acting is pretty bad, the action is pretty derivative of Transformers, and so on. We could mention many other things, but perhaps in the hands of a talented writer, this same story could really succeed where it fails in the hands of director Peter Berg. Perhaps our novelizer, Peter David, might take the raw material provided by the Hober brothers and through judicious verbiage and some nice imagery, bring it to life, making use of the slower pace of the novel. What do you think, Tony? You think that might be possible? Peter David, of course, was given a rather unenviable task. This is not his first movie novelization. He's also written The Incredible Hulk, Iron Man, Spider-Man, Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man 3, among others. I'd imagine he'd be prouder of some of his original works, which are mostly in the comic fantasy genre. He has a series called Sir Apropos of Nothing and has written expanded universe novels for Dungeons & Dragons and some other things. So what can we say overall about the novelization of Battleship? Well, it's pretty bad, but then we might have expected that, given that the Hober brothers script, I'm sad to say, is itself a bit of a hack job. We're left without the exciting visuals, the action, the explosions, the bright saturated colors of the film. That being said, I think Peter David really made, if not his best, then a pretty generous effort to a project that did not deserve a particularly artistic treatment. And I find it interesting, really interesting, to step into his shoes and think about what was going through his mind as he was trying to adapt this story in 233 pages. So I guess you guys can already guess where my verdict is heading, but I thought it might be interesting in a moment to delve into some of the details of this book and go through some of the passages that most struck me. How does that sound to you guys? Jimmy? Jimmy, you're shaking your head. Yeah. Oh, okay, let's get right into it after the break. This is Connor for the 706 Podcasts, 7 or 6 Book Report. This Valentine's Day, a new audio draw mystery romance from the creators of the Limerence Equation and the Rattlebag Gravehouse Mysteries. She was a high-powered Wall Street executive with a love of art and literature. What's that sound? I've been coming to this museum for years and never heard it before. He was a PhD student in classics with a rare talent. What is that music? It's all coming from that little thing? This, little lady, is what you call a jaw harp. I'm sorry if this sounds a little strange, but what are you doing tonight? Well, aside from harping, I might go catch a movie. You ever seen The Hidden Fortress? No. And so, Connor, thank you for this wonderful evening. It's really shown me a side of life I never knew before. That Kurosawa movie and these spicy chicken sandwiches are just incredible. How does no one else know about this place? I think I love you. Hey, a girl who can get down with Kurosawa? I think I might love you too, little lady. No. I'm so sorry, but I can't. I made a promise. I can't be in a relationship with anyone until I figure out who killed my butler. You have a butler? The rest is mystery. In a wild audio adventure that will take them from the mean streets of New York to a sleepy southern town. Say, son, I reckon you got yourself a jaw harp and them's there's trousers if you're not just happy to see me, that is. Oh. Your eyes see clear enough, old-timer. And what of it? Well, if you ever want to talk to that butler's ghost, and I'm supposing you do, I'd say it's high time we had ourselves a harp off. Right here, right now. You're on. To a dark, filthy club in a hedonistic billionaire's private mountain sex fortress. Oh, my God. Just close your eyes, little lady, and take my hand. A story of true love, betrayal, mystery, and robots. The Wandering Jaw. Available February 14th for free as part of your Castable subscription and everywhere podcasts are sold. Subscribe to Castable now to receive 2 months of free access to all premium content, along with a free month's full membership to LibFuck, an exclusive social networking and dating app for people just like you. What is good writing? Is it a craft? Is it like a film put on paper? Or is it actually more like something completely different? That's what we're here to figure out. Welcome back, everyone, to the 7 or 6 Book Report. It's me, Connor, again, along with my co-hosts. Just quickly, that's Anthony, Tony, Jimmy Stewart, and Kirk. Say hi, guys. One at a time. Thanks, guys. Our subject is still Battleship, the official novelization of the film by Peter David. We're taking a deeper dive into the text here, and I'll try my best to get some value out of my literature degree. All right. Settle down now. All right. Now, when I'm trying to assess a writer of fiction, I like to go right to the first description of a beautiful woman in the text. This is a great challenge for any writer, but of course especially for heterosexual male writers. many of the greats, Jonathan Franz and Joss Whedon, fail the test and are all too often mercilessly mocked for it. The question is, how, in the non-graphic medium of the written word, to communicate the fact that a woman is attractive to the characters and perhaps to the reader without seeming too horny? This is a problem filmmakers do not face, and I think it's taken for granted in a way. They can simply cast a conventionally hot woman in the role. I mean, you know all about that, don't you, Jimmy? Yeah. There's an element of framing in the way the camera is used and so forth, but it's easy enough to simply have the casting do the talking. You don't have to verbally slobber over the person in question. The audience does that for you. But in writing, when you as the author/narrator sound a bit too excited, you sound horny over the imaginary woman you've created in your mind, and that makes people uncomfortable. But in film, too, you're getting horny over an imaginary woman in your head, but it's just eventually becomes physically realized, so it's not all that different. And then there's animation, and that has a very well-observed horniness problem, but I digress. And as a counterpoint to all this, by the way, there's an equal and opposite danger of appearing too unhorny, because anyway, a passage like this appears quite early in Battleship when Brooklyn Decker's character Sam, the love interest, is introduced. Hopper sees her at a bar. You may remember from the film she's asking for a chicken burrito. Let's see how David deals with this thorny problem, or horny problem. This is page 14. Quote, "A gorgeous young woman was seated at the bar, arguing with the bartender, a big Hawaiian named Akau. The woman was a knockout of a blonde, with sculpted features and piercing blue eyes that a man could take a headfirst dive into and never want to emerge. Add to that the fact that she not only had a body that wouldn't quit, but a body that no one would ever think of firing once it was in their employ. A couple of island boys were standing off to the side, eyeing her with a drunken longing, although it was impossible to determine whether, page 15, they would wind up hitting on her or just admiring her from afar." Unquote. Now, think for a second about what David does here. You have to describe Brooklyn Decker's character, but there's no Brooklyn Decker. How to avoid horniness? How? Corniness. Knock out of a blonde. We retreat into cliche. Take a dive into her eyes. It's a bad pickup line, and it's definitely tongue-in-cheek here. Her body. Now, this is where we get into dangerous, horny territory. But we do this wordplay with the whole body that wouldn't quit, and it gets a little horny, but the thing is, it's corny. It makes you smirk. Then, just for extra measure, David uses a more standard technique for avoiding horniness in descriptions. You have your characters be horny for you. The island boys, whatever that's supposed to mean, are longing for her, so there's no question that she's attractive. Already, I have to say I was impressed. Some might find it a tad over the horny line. I might say it's a tad too far on the unhorny side, but this shows we're dealing with a thoughtful writer here. You could have just said stunning, hot, shapely, and so on, or given a more, photographic type description. But I like how this is very verbal, very abstract, writerly. And there's one other moment in the book that really stands out to me for the prose. So after Hopper has stolen the chicken burrito for Sam and joined the Navy, he's won her heart, and they wind up having a night of passion on the beach. And I know, Tony, you must be thinking, here we go, the horniness problem rears its head again. But no, David simply avoids any description of physical intimacy. We fade to black, as it were. But now they wake up and they find they've overslept and they're late for the naval exercises. So they're scrambling to put their clothes on and get in the car, and Sam says on page 48, quote, "You better get it together, Hopper." Paragraph break now. Back to narration. He nodded in hurried agreement as he pulled on his shirt. Sam was hastening to get into her shorts and succeeded in shoving both her legs into the same pants leg, cursing like, appropriately enough, a sailor, as she extracted her left leg and started over, bouncing on her right foot as she endeavored to maintain her balance. Page 49. "Just another day in paradise," thought Hopper. Unquote. There it is. We've got a writer, folks. PD is flexing right here. That long second sentence has what Cicero called rotunditas, rotundity or roundness, a kind of fullness to it. First of all, it's just a succinct, lifelike description of something we've all seen and done, having trouble putting on pants. There's a suspension, same pants leg, comma, suspension, cursing like, M dash, suspension within the suspension, appropriately enough, M dash, a sailor, stop, we've ground the sentence to a halt here, as she, and then it rolls on. Then started over, and comma, another suspension that balances out the first. The sentence itself hobbles and finds its balance. Marvelous. The M dash. Does this remind you of anyone, Anthony? Yeah, I'm thinking Henry James. A nice long sentence with these interruptions and switchbacks. This sentence honestly stopped me in my tracks when I read it, and so I'm gushing about it now. Here, David is letting you glimpse his true powers as a wordsmith, just a well-hewn marble statue, this sentence. But I'm sad to say you will not see its like again in this novel. Elsewhere, the narration is pretty plodding, pretty unremarkable. There are a couple moments that stand out, but this more on the intellectual than the aesthetic level. For example, the aliens have arrived and our characters are trying to figure out what the hell to do about it. David will describe things that happen in the script and film in a dutiful, sort of unadorned fashion. Occasionally, though, he makes references to pop culture, especially to other sci-fi and disaster movies. Take this moment where we switch perspective to this fighter pilot overlooking the action. His call sign is Rough Rider. Quote, page 104. The strange structure below him was starting to glow. His instruments went haywire, and suddenly, inexplicably, he was flashing back to that moment in Close Encounters of the Third Kind when vehicles went berserk in the presence of alien technology. Rough Rider was no big believer in UFOs. He endeavored to seize control of his F-18, which was fighting them as if they were suddenly opponents. Reagan Control, Rough Rider 404. I don't know what this is. There's some kind of energy field forming. There's an incredible amount of unquote. He crashes. Quote, he was no longer Rough Rider. Instead, he was just plain old Kenny Johnson, screaming at the top of his lungs as the F-18 crashed into the side of the uncanny structure and exploded into a ball of flame. Unquote. A very classic, I dare say Homeric, authorial move, humanizing this random casualty in the script was just an expository device. But the main point I'm calling attention to here is the reference to Close Encounters. Kind of interesting, right, to use the characters and our knowledge of popular cinema as a shorthand in a non-visual medium. I kind of wonder if this, like that part in Close Encounters, was in the original script as a note, for the Hober brothers to the storyboard artists. If that's the case, then David is cleverly integrating that into the interiority of a character in a way that pulls us closer to him rather than, pulling us out of the story. Okay, maybe it seems a bit lazy to use that as a technique, but think, this is just a small side scene. Why tarry too long in a flowery description at this point? And then at times, though, it feels more like empty references just for the sake of humor. Here's the part where they've taken what they think is an alien corpse and are examining it in the ship's medical bay. This is page 165. Quote, they were all dealing with various degrees of shock, and it was easy to understand why. Mankind's first extended encounter, face-to-face with an alien life form, and it was happening right on their ship. And it was happening under the most mundane conditions possible, not with a flying saucer descending into Central Park, or perhaps on the front lawn of the White House, with an alien being in a silver lame spacesuit stepping out and saying in a stentorian voice, nice, Peter, take me to your leader. No, instead, it was on a makeshift operating table like something out of a damn police procedural, CSI ET, or maybe SVU UFO, unquote. Okay, it gets a laugh, not great, but these references conjure a mood, a mental image, which is interesting considering that the reader probably has also seen the film and already has a mental image to go with all this. Can we say there are moments where the book improves upon the film? Your mileage may vary, but some gags I felt came across better on the page than the screen. And there are moments, too, where David goes out of his way to make sense of the script in a way the film cannot. There's this scene I loved in the movie where Rakes, that's Rihanna's character, manages to corner an alien and is ready to blow it away with the ship's 5-inch gun. And speaking of 5-inch gun, Kirk, how's your dad? Just joshing. In a climactic moment, she says, "Mahalo, mother f," and the fucker part is drowned out by the sound of the cannon firing. Now, I always thought that this was funny because the way the line is delivered, it sounds as if she's saying, something like adios, muchacho, or hasta la vista, baby. In Hollywood, you say something cool in a foreign language before you do something badass, like killing someone. But unlike adios, mahalo in Hawaiian doesn't mean goodbye. That would be aloha. It means thank you. It alliterates with motherfuckers. That sounds cooler. But did they really mean for her to say thank you, motherfucker, before killing this alien? Well, David really spells this out. Page 182, quote, Rakes in the CIC watched in satisfaction as she lined up the crosshairs of the bow deck's 5-inch gun squarely on the back of the alien's head. Since the dumbass monster had been generous enough to stand still so she could draw a bead on it, she felt that thanking it for doing so would only be polite, even though it couldn't hear her. Mahalo, motherfucker. She fired. The alien was just starting to turn in the direction of the gun when the projectile punched through its head, in through the already cracked faceplate, and out through the back. The now headless alien actually continued to stand there for a moment, its arms out to either side. Then it slumped backwards and tumbled over the railing. Unquote. Good. Well, David adds a little cherry on top, something not in the movie. Quote, "Just in the nearly headless nick of time," said Rakes, whose deepest, darkest secret was that she was a fan of Harry Potter. Unquote. Nearly headless. Well, it doesn't quite work. I mean, he's completely headless. That she would audibly make a pun on something she is ashamed of liking. I mean, anyway, it made me smile. Now, for the last portion of my book report, I'd like to take a look at a scene that is actually not in the movie. There are a few parts like this in the novel. There's a sort of prologue about the childhood of the brothers Hopper, a few very boring scenes with the scientist characters trying to contact aliens, a couple vignettes about what happens with the parts of the alien fleet that land in other countries. There are two possibilities for these differences from the film. Either David made them up in writing this adaptation of the script, or they were originally in the Hober Brothers script and just cut from the movie by Berg. In all the above-mentioned cases, I think the latter more likely. Why would David go to such lengths when the story makes enough sense already? To pad out the length, I suppose, but I have no way of knowing what his publisher actually asked him to produce. This next passage, however, I feel in my gut, must be the invention of our author. It bears the marks of his worldview, his preoccupations. It comes at almost exactly the halfway point of the book, and it serves as a kind of key that clinches our interpretation of the rest of the text. It's a quiet moment, a contemplative moment, a bit out of character for the high-octane style of the Hober brothers. If you gentlemen would please indulge me, I'd like to read the whole passage. Would that be all right, Jimmy? Don't make that face, Jimmy. We're almost done. Page 125, The White House. The president could scarcely credit what he was seeing. If he'd been informed about it secondhand, he would have questioned the reliability, if not the sanity, of the source. Looking at it now, though, he almost started to wonder about his own sanity. What he was staring at, being played back to him on a screen in the Situation Room, was nothing less than a barrier constructed of the very Pacific Ocean itself. He certainly had experience with what nature was capable of accomplishing in Hawaii. Storms, typhoons, the best and worst that God, in his acts, had to offer. But what he was witnessing now was beyond anything he had ever seen. It seemed instead like something out of a fantasy movie, cooked up by a wizard, as a weapon against another wizard. Arthur C. Clarke's oft-quoted statement ran through his head. Any sufficiently advanced form of technology will seem like magic. Still, it was so beyond anything he'd ever experienced that he had to remind himself that no, this wasn't magic, just technology. Extremely advanced. Science against which no Earth technology had any counter. We are so screwed. The film had been taken from a distance by a naval vessel and forwarded through channels not only to him, but to the heads of state from every country being represented in the war games, which were, at the moment, suspended. Apparently a real war had overtaken the games, fought against an enemy that was outside the experience of everyone involved. Mountains of water, impassable, impenetrable, were arrayed around Oahu. From the latest intel on the president's desk, there were 3 ships, 2 Americans, 1 Japanese, within the perimeter. Everyone else was stuck outside, cut off as a localized storm kept them at bay. Sheets of lightning rippled up and down the water barrier. The Joint Chiefs sat around the table, waiting for the president to absorb what he was seeing. Meanwhile, on another screen, CNN was on, muted, but the closed captioning was activated. Little is known beyond the fact that all communication with the island state went down at 12:20 Eastern Standard Time. Extreme weather is now cutting off Hawaii from the outside world. A probable connection to events in Hong Kong is being investigated. The president leaned back in his chair, studying the other screens, each depicting a site around the world that had also been damaged. Viscos, said the president finally. One of the Joint Chiefs sat forward, resting his forehead on the large table around which they were all grouped. We don't have a best guess, Mr. President. Every single country that could possibly be behind this got hit themselves. No one was spared. Which only means, said another general, it was no single country. Terrorists. It has to be terrorists. The chief of staff looked skeptical. You're telling me that the people who couldn't even blow up a pair of sneakers coordinated something like this? I'm saying the people who knocked down the Twin Towers coordinated something like this. The president shook his head. No, I'm not buying it. Even on 9/11, they used standard Earth technology, Earth airplanes. Mr. President, the vice president put up a hand as if he were in second grade. You keep saying Earth. Are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm saying it outright. I'm saying what Sherlock Holmes always said. That whenever you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, is the truth. Someone here want to try to sell me on the notion that, he pointed at the wall of water, is within the realm of possibility, based on what we know current science can produce? Because I'm looking at that giant water wall with lightning flashing all around it, and I'm telling you this is either a result of extraterrestrial science, or somewhere right now, Zeus is instructing that the Kraken be released. Sir, the vice president started again. Come on, man. You're talking about alien invasion. That's the kind of thing you see in disaster movies, not in real life. Perhaps. Except how many New York landmarks have we seen blown up in those same disaster movies? Plus, there was an episode of a television series, The Lone Gunman, that centered around a plot to fly airplanes into the World Trade Center. Life imitates art, gentlemen. How many of you, and he took in the entire table in a glance, didn't watch the Twin Towers collapsing a decade ago and feel as if, just for a moment at least, the world had turned into a Michael Bay movie? There were silent, reluctant nods from several of them. As far as the president was concerned, those who didn't nod simply didn't want to cop to it. Then the chief of staff said slowly, Sir, if what you're saying is true, we need to get you on Marine One into a secure location. We need to do it immediately. I don't see that as a necessity. Sir, the chief of staff said more forcefully, if we're going to operate under the assumption that what you're saying is true, and considering that whomever or whatever it is we're dealing with has hostile intent, which we have to believe considering they've made no attempt to engage us in any other way other than those that have cost human lives, I believe what the chief of staff is saying, said the vice president, is that if we're sticking with the whole life imitates art theory, well, I think we all remember the poster for Independence Day. The big alien saucer blowing the living crap out of... Yes, said the president. Yes, I remember it. He drummed his fingers on the table. I don't like it. It seems like running away. Think of it more as a strategic retreat, said one of the Joint Chiefs. Heads around the room nodded in agreement. Sir, said the chief of staff softly, it's worth noting there may well come a point where the Secret Service isn't going to give you the option. Better to walk out on your own while things are quiet than to be dragged out while the ceiling's caving in, don't you think? The president slowly sagged back in his chair and looked bleakly around the room. So this is what it's like to be the most powerful man in the world. You go to ground when danger threatens. Form Marine One and get my family together, said the president quietly in the hushed room. Okay. That was all Peter David. And I mean, wow. It's a lot. You can see how this is not the sort of thing that could have appeared in the movie, just for the issue of the casting alone, obviously. But David is making use of his medium. He sees his opportunity to show us the scope of the threat the characters are facing, and he's not afraid to reach for some themes while he's at it. I've mentioned the references before, but here, tellingly, in the White House Situation Room is where they fly the fastest, most of them made explicitly by the president himself. First, Arthur C. Clarke. We're invoking the whole science fiction tradition here, revisiting the grand old theme of our being bested technologically by a more advanced civilization. A bit of comeuppance for Western technocracy, putting ourselves in the shoes of the invaded, of the colonized. But then, a left turn. We go there. 9/11. This scar on the American psyche, itself a kind of symbol of our guilty conscience that we refuse to recognize as such. The Kraken from Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End contrasted with the technological threat. We want to think of this as a supernatural threat, act of God, because if we're being attacked by advanced aliens, they're just using our own imperial logic against us. In other words, the aliens are the same as us, and that's hard to deal with. This was a theme latent in the Berg film, but notice how very unmacho, how un-gung-ho, how un-Bergian and un-Bay-esque the treatment of it here is. But then, and this is what really gets me, a third theme is layered on top of the first two. Life imitates art, gentlemen. Obama and Biden, leaders of the free world, sequestered in their Situation Room, watching these disasters play out on CNN just as we do. And they're just trading movie references back and forth. Aristotle said that art imitates. It's called mimesis. It can imitate life, sure, but more importantly, it can imitate that which does not exist and which may seem unlikely, but which is nevertheless plausible. Now, that plausible is the essence of fiction as entertainment and as rhetoric. But it's also what comes back to bite us. Because what can happen may happen, and when it does, art loses its entertainment value. The pleasure of plausibility is replaced by the pain of reality, and that reality itself begins to feel as if it's made up. especially as we increasingly take it in through the same medium of the screen that we take fiction in through. Historical events, as they play out before our eyes, seem as if they can't be happening to us. History is a spectacle we experience, not something we actually make in our own lives. All we can do, as Obama does in this passage, is turn away, to look after ourselves first. Notice how there's this bristling of excitement in the press now about the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The sentiment is finally a real war like you can see on the big screen. Life imitates art in the sense that art can give us meaning, give us structure, give us understanding of our experiences. Yet, the fact that it is so integral a part of how we learn about real life can also paralyze us and make our world seem unreal. Real blood looks fake, like ketchup on a movie set. Real bodies seem to hit the floor like dummies. You become infatuated with someone based on how they seem to fit into the movie that is your life, and you doubt all the while that it's just an illusion, that life can't really work out that way. Life imitates art, gentlemen, or perhaps better, art turns life into art. How sad but true it is. I wonder if this problem I've just mentioned is really exacerbated too by the live action nature of film itself. Maybe the fact that movies can resemble reality is exactly what makes reality resemble fiction or film. I think our author may, interestingly enough, be taking a subtle dig at cinema itself and elevating his own literary medium, which works upon the imagination alone. Obviously, life can imitate books as well, but how much worse might this dear realization I was just mentioning be if we improved on, the sensual verisimilitude of film? If, for instance, we had smell-o-vision, will we no longer be able to believe our noses? Or if we had a virtual way of touching? I know what you're thinking there, Jimmy. Easy now. Easy, Jimmy. Wouldn't that, at some point, lead to a collapse of the distinction between reality and simulation? Maybe David is saying that his own chosen medium is this antidote to our increasing sense of unreality. We have to turn off our screens and open our mind's eye, that sort of thing. Others have obviously explored these questions, but I think it's impressive that we find them raised here in the novelization of a movie of a board game by Hasbro. So hats off to David for this additional scene. Okay, guys, that's it for my comments on the text of Battleship by Peter David. Now, if you stick around for just one more segment, Jim, one more, we'll decide, does this book belong in the canon of the 7 or 6 greatest books of all time? Be right back. And we're back. So, as a reminder, this podcast will be a little different in that it's up to me, the person who's read the book, to decide whether I even want to nominate it for the 7 or 6. I hope I won't be disappointing you fellas, but based on what I've seen and discussed here, I just don't think I can, with a clear conscience, even present this to you as a real candidate. Though it did have that one great sentence and did raise some really interesting questions about a relationship to media in a post 9/11 world. It's just not the sort of thing that I think should take up a spot in our literary pantheon. I mean, no offense to Peter David, of course, who I really sympathize with and actually respect as someone who takes writing seriously myself, and I never seem to do it. I really do take my hat off to those who, given a task like this, can dash off a pretty decent 200 and some pages. But I guess I'll turn it around to you fellas for some final comments. Do you dissent? Do you want to expand on... Oh, sorry, Kirk. That's right. Yeah, you can go. Of course, no problem. My bad, I forgot. And you guys? Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. It is pretty late, so we can wrap it here. No problem. Let's just sign off. This has been the 7 or 6 book report with me, Connor. We'll see you next time. Okay. Night, Tony. Night, Anthony. See ya. Jimmy? Oh, Jim, why didn't you say you had a date? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I definitely won't keep you then. Oh, me? No, nothing. I'm just playing my jaw harp, I guess. Yeah. Okay, Jim. See you next time. Yep. Bye-bye.